Welcome to the video. Marie Curie, a great nuclear scientist. Marie Curie was born November 7, 1867. Her name was Mania Skolodowska in Warsaw, Poland. Her mother and father were both teachers, and she learned a lot from her father. He was a physics teacher at kind of a high school. And this was back during the Russian control of Poland, so they were under a lot of tight controls there, and that women weren't allowed to go to college. So in 1886, she begins her work as a governess, as a young woman, to save money to go to the University of Paris. There she wants to study science. That's her big dream. And then in 1891, she enrolls at the University of Paris, or the Sorbonne, as Mademoiselle Marie Skolodowska. By then, she had changed her name from Mania to Marie to make it more of a French-sounding name. 1893, she receives her master's degree in physics. The next year, she's employed by France's Society for the Encouragement of National Industry to study the magnetic properties of steels, and she receives a degree in mathematics and meets her future husband, Pierre Curie. And he was a chemist, teacher, physics and chemistry teacher at another smaller university there in Paris. And he was also an expert on electromagnetics and measurement. And so she was given his name by her major professor there at the University of Paris as somebody that was real knowledgeable about how to measure things that were very faint and hard to measure, like this radioactivity would be. And so she goes over and talks to him, and of course they fall in love and get married. 1895, they were married. In 1897, Marie begins her investigation of what's called Becquerel rays as her doctoral thesis. This was radioactivity that had been discovered by Henry Becquerel. He was there in Paris also, and this was just a few years before, and people really didn't know what it was. It was pretty confusing because Wilhelm Röntgen had just discovered X-rays a few years earlier, and they had similar properties, so she was trying to figure this out. And then her husband, figuring this was pretty important work, decided to join her. He had already been helping her, but he basically gave up his research and is just helping her full-time, as much as they can. They have a child. They end up having 2 daughters, and he's teaching full-time, and she's teaching part-time at a girls' school. So in 1898, announces her husband the discovery of polonium and radium. These are 2 radioactive materials. They were part of a uranium ore called pitchblende, and they had to process a lot of this to get out these radioactive elements. So now she begins her 4-year effort to prepare a pure sample of radium. Radium turned out to be very radioactive, but she had to basically go through 2 tons of this pitchblende and manually, chemically reduce it down. And it was a lot of effort. It took a long time. It was kind of hard work. Now, in 1903, they received kind of their reward, or a reward. She received her doctorate in physics from the University of Paris. And both her and her husband, along with this Henry Becquerel, share the Nobel Prize in physics for the discovery of radioactivity. Now, the Curies did not discover radioactivity, but they took Becquerel's initial findings and did a lot more with it. In 1906, tragedy struck the family as Perry was killed when his horse-drawn wagon was run over in a busy Paris street. This was during a rainstorm. And he was getting pretty sick by this time anyway, because he had been so close to the radiation, and he'd also done some testing on himself that he put enough radiation next to his skin where it burnt his skin and made it bubble up. So he was already starting to show signs of radiation sickness by the time he was killed. And the University of Paris installed Marie as a replacement because she had a PhD and she was very knowledgeable about physics and chemistry. And she became the first female professor at the University of Paris, also called the Sorbonne. In 1911, the French Academy of Sciences refuses to grant membership because she's a woman. There was a lot of sexism at that time because she was a female, and she broke a lot of glass ceilings in her work. Most places she went, she was the first female involved in the sciences. And in 1911, she receives another Nobel Prize in chemistry for the discovery of radium and polonium. She's the only lady to receive 2 Nobel Prizes in all of history, and it was in 2 different areas, physics and chemistry, so it's quite impressive. World War I came around, and Marie begins to set up a network of portable and hospital-based X-ray machines to treat wounded soldiers. The X-ray machine had not really been out that long, and a lot of the doctors were not aware of how it all worked, but she was familiar with the technology and helped them set up like 200 mobile units and hospital-based units, and so it saved an estimated about 1 million lives because they were able to determine where the bullet was in the soldier or where the shrapnel was and extract it without just simply removing an arm. So it allowed a lot of very more delicate surgeries because they could see what was in there. 1918, World War I ends, and The Radium Institute at the University of Paris officially opens, and this is where Marie would finish her final days. It was the study of radioactivity and all the applications of it. Now, she goes on a fundraising tour. She actually does 2 of them to America, and she meets with President Harding, and he gives her a gram of radium. Not that he had one in his back pocket, but it was one that had been gathered up by a group that was sponsoring her trip. It doesn't sound like a big deal, 1 gram of radium, but at that time that was probably worth about $100,000, at least that's what the estimate is. It was very rare stuff. 1934, Curie's older daughter, Irene, they had 2 daughters. One was Irene and one was Eve. Eve was more of an artist. Irene turned out to be a great scientist in her own right, and she married Frederick Joly, and they discovered artificial radioactivity in 1934, and that was the same year that her mother died, Marie Curie, of leukemia caused by all the radiation poisoning. Even till this day, her notebooks and some of her clothing have to be kept in lead-sealed boxes because they're so radioactive. So she was just eaten up with this stuff. So if you want to know more about Marie Curie, I've listed some information in the description of this video. Hope you like this video, got something out of it. If you did, please subscribe to my channel, and thank you for watching.